all this is trying to say is that the total cost unit, right, is equal to the cost unit of each course incrementally until you've exhausted all the courses that are available. So all this line is saying is that the total cost unit is going to be gotten by incrementing it by the cost unit of each course until you have exhausted the total courses that were imputed. Similarly here, the total weight point is going to be incremented by the cost weight point of each courses until you have exhausted all the courses that were imputed. The total cost unit passed is going to be incremented by the cost unit passed of each course until you have exhausted all the courses that were imputed. That is what this for each loop does. Then outside, you now calculate the GPA, which is a float value. So float GPA is equal to float total weight points divided by total cost unit. Why you need to include float here is so that it will return a float. The GPA is a float, so you need to include the float here to make sure it returns a float. Then result.gpa is going to be equal to GPA because you've created this object here, result. And now you've gotten the GPA here. So in order to equate the GPA that this result would hold to the GPA that has been gotten, you have to say result.gpa. Then at the end of the method, you are going to return result. And take note that result is an instance of the class student. And this method is meant to return the type student. So yeah, I hope we all understand that. Now we have looked at the data store, the entities, the services, and we've seen the course service, grading service, and student service. Now let's look at the helpers. And like I said earlier, the helper folder is where we put code that is going to help us do other things in our application. Like for instance, in this application, the helpers folder contains the utility class, utility.cs, which helps us print the students results per se. So let's see what happens there. In the utility class, we have using GPA calculator.entities, that's the entities namespace, and we also have using static system.console. Using static system.console allows us to use WriteLine in C#. We could easily use WriteLine, as you can see here, instead of saying console.WriteLine, or instead of saying system.console.WriteLine. So had it been we just said using static system and close the semicolon, we would have to use console.WriteLine in our code. But since we already have the console here, we've already brought in the namespace up here, so we can just use WriteLine in the code. And this static here, this is how to bring in the system.console namespace. Static just means that there is only one instance of this namespace. So now let's see what happens in it. We have the namespace GPA calculator.helpers. We have the internal class utility. Here that we use the internal access modifier, it doesn't change much in the code. It could be public, it could be internal. I advise you research on access modifiers to know the difference between internal, public, private, and the rest. But in this case, it doesn't change anything in our code. I could change it to public now and it wouldn't change anything. So let's see, internal class utility. Okay, and why most times when you create a class in Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, actually in Visual Studio it usually creates as an internal class, so it's left for you to change it to public or private as the case may be. But in this case, the internal doesn't really change much in our code, it still works perfectly fine. Then we have the public static void print cost table. The public here means, okay, this method, now we are creating a method to print the costs table, right? This is the name of the method. The return type is void because it prints the table. It doesn't return a string or an integer or anything. It returns void, but it prints a cost table for us. So the static here means that there's only one instance of this method, one instance of the method, and the public is the access modifier. Then the method parameter here is the list of courses, list courses. What this is just saying is that the parameters that will be used in this method are going to be the courses that have been imputed for the calculation. So now, first we should have this dash at the top. Let me go to the question. Okay, from the task question, it is said that the results should be displayed in a tabular form as shown below. So you should have something like this displayed on your console for the results. So that's all we are trying to do there. This dash line is going to create dash lines at the top. Then this right line is going to ensure that we have a new line. Then this right line format now is the formatting for our line. Is the string formatting for our table. You can see you have 0, -15, 1, -15, 2, -10. Let me explain what that does. What it does is that, for instance, you can see here you have okay, for the first one you have 0, -15, -15. It means that the first item in the columns, right, which is index 0, the first item in the columns which is index 0 should be indented. Okay, index 0 stands for the first item, right? Then the negative sign means that it should be indented towards the left, while number 15 means that the space in that column should be able to take 15 characters. So same thing with 1. 1 stands for index 1. That's the second column in this case, which is a cost unit. It also should be indented to the left and it should take 15 characters. Same thing for 2, indented to the left 10 characters. Same thing for 3, indented to the left 13 characters. For 4, indented to the left 13, 5, 13. So this is what we have here. The first column, we have the cost code, we have the cost unit, we have the grade, we have the grade unit, we have the weight points, we have the remark, just like we have here in the question. So after that, we have another dash to create the display, and we have another right line to get a new line. Then we use a for each loop here. For each course in courses, for each course in courses, we now use the same right line format again, this time to create these lines you see here, Math 101, GS 101, like to create these lines, to create the lines for the courses. You know, this first right line we did here is just to create the heading. Now this one we have inside here that is going to use the course in courses is going to create the lines for the courses that have been provided, and it's going to give their respective course code, course units, course score, and the rest. And you can see that the course.course code, course.course units, they are all gotten from the course, and they're all gotten, everything is gotten, students grade units, course weight point, everything is gotten. You can see, right? So that's what happens there. So after that you have another dash, another right line to create a new line. So down here we have to create the dash method in order to ensure that this dash here does what we want it to do, by doing the public dash, public static void dash string dash the parameter for this method is the dash string dash. The system knows this. So for int I equals to 0 and I is less than 98 and I plus plus, we are going to write dash. So what this means is that from I equals to 0, that is from index 0 to index 99, or to index less than 98, which is 97, increase I by 1. So what this does is that it gives us 97 dashes anytime we use the method dash. So right here that we use this dash with the dash in bracket, it gives us 97 dashes I mean. And I was actually the one that chose these dashes to be 97 because of how it would look in my application, because I used 100 the first time. It didn't give me the look I wanted. It was a little bit more than what I wanted, so I chose 98, which would give me 97 dashes. So once you write dash, like this is what the method does, it just gives us the dashes. So anytime we say dash this, dash this, dash this, it gives us. So that's that for this.